Okay, I'm from the Nordic Institute of Asian Studies. I'm an anthropologist, social anthropologist, but I hold minor degrees in botany, geology, and zoology. But I'm not going to go into statistical details about global warming, sea rise or non-sea rise. I'm going by basic things as seen and as known from people. These are not these are mine. I don't know. I was told that I should sort of make things reasonably understandable, and I don't know how many of you are conversant with atoll environments. The map is of the Maldives Islands. It's Maldives, it's not dive. It's a route from Sanskrit, Diva Dwipa Island. And you can see it's stretching from north to south, just south of India, just south of Sri Lanka, down across the equator. One atoll is below the equator and one small polar island is. Now, if you go north, you come to the Indian area of the Lakshadweep Islands, the Lakshadweep, Amindip, and Minicoy Islands, which lies way to the south. You have this small island of Minicoy, which is a coral atoll with a lagoon. The coral atoll is a ring reef with a central lagoon. Here you see Minicoy Island, where you can travel quite easily, but only by boat. And here you see the rim of an atoll. You can see the rather empty large lagoon. This is the atoll of Huadu, just north of the 1.5-degree channel in the Maldives. And you will see the open sea, and you will see the passages where the tidal waters pass through. And here you can see a closer view where you see these tidal channels. And let's say atolls are very dynamic environments. Corals are living organisms. They grow, and as they grow, atolls change with time. You have erosion, you have new islands forming, and you have islands vanishing. And this means all the time in coral atolls you will see serious erosion in some places, and you will see growth in other places. Now, what the Maldives is doing at the moment is that they market the sea rise. They say we are a small country, the highest point is only 3 meters above sea level, and so we are vanishing fast. Now, if we look at atoll dynamics, Darwin was the first one who had an atoll theory. He thought it was a cone volcano, a stratovolcano, and the reef would form around the volcano cone, and then it would, the cone would be eroded away, and you would have the circle. Now we know that coral atolls will form anywhere where there is a substrate for corals to grow. You start with a small central core, and then the corals grow out. They expand like a smoke ring. Or if you know mushrooms, you know that certain mushrooms grow in circles. They deprive the center of organic material, and then they grow out. The same thing happens with atolls. Once they have grown large enough, you have the formation of microatolls within the lagoon. And here you can quite easily see the process. You can see all these dots. Same thing will happen with mushrooms. Once the circle has expanded, you have small inside growth. And here again you can see a microatoll a bit closer up. Now here you have 2 inhabited islands in the Maldives. And if we move on, we see the tourist resorts that are being built. They expand into the water. I will show you more pictures. You have a pier to walk on. Then you have the small hutments on poles, like you find it in Pacific, it's not a typical Maldivian building style. And here I want to show you atolls look the same all over the world. This is the atoll of all the Maldivian towns when I was there in the late 70s and early 80s. Here we have a photo from the island of Minicoy, where they also speak Maldivian. In the rest of the Laccadives, they speak a language, a Maldivian language, akin to Malayalam. But here they, in Minicoy, which is called Maniku in Divehi, the Maldivian language, they speak Mal, which is actually Divehi. And here we're looking at Minicoy Island, with the small island of Lingeli, where you can see heavy erosion on one side of the island. This island is growing. It's not because of sea rise, it's because of normal atoll dynamics. If we're looking at the capital of the Maldives, Male, it has grown extensively. Tourism in the Maldives took off in the late 1990s. The first tourist hotel was built in the Maldives actually in 1971, a small facility with 20 rooms. But then tourism was down market. Now the Maldives have become one of the prime upmarket destinations of the world, where you meet movie stars, as Professor Werner mentioned, where you meet everybody who is somebody, and where the Maldives is used as the example of the threat against small island nations. I would say the threat is minimal in the Maldives, again because of the dynamic nature of coral atolls. Atolls grow, coral islands grow all the time. Corals can grow up to 1 centimeter a year, meaning that you get a new accumulation along the beaches. And you see how Male has grown. It has become a small Singapore in the center of the Indian Ocean. The Maldives have the highest per capita income in South Asia. And you see the chain list here. If we look back, this is 1992, when major tourism is just taking off. It's a country of bicycles. Now it's a country of cars and pollution, where harbors are being built out all over the country. The Maldives depend on fisheries, but they also have agriculture, where here is the taro field in the south, depends on fresh water. Fresh water is brought by the monsoon. The Maldives receives both monsoon and water in coral atolls with fresh water will float as a freshwater lens on top of the seawater. We have a number of the usual coastal trees, atoll trees. Of course, this is breadfruit. And in the north, where you have less rain and where the islands are cyclone prone, you grow millets here. And then an interesting thing about the Maldives, because the Maldives are being described both as the prime tourist destination, the prime upmarket tourist destination, but also when they present themselves as a COP15, they say we are a poor nation that have few skilled people. Now, the Maldives, during the late history of India, was a place in India, let's say, was a place in South Asia that had the highest literacy rate for both females and males. It's an interesting fact that if we go back 50 years, the literacy rate of females was close to 90%, whereas the literacy rate for males was slightly below that, around 85%. So usually when I would ask a Maldivian male to write something down, he would say, please ask my wife, because she is more literate than I am. And this is an interesting fact. The same goes for, this is a picture from the 50s that I picked out on an old photo album in Minicoy. And this is a girl learning to write on a tablet. Again, Minicoy today has the highest literacy rate in India, along with the state of Kerala. And there is no no connection between the two, because Minicoy Island had this literacy rate long before Kerala initiated their educational programs. In Minicoy, you were collecting water in tanks, and some of the small tanks are still left over. Of course, the Indian government has intervened with pumping facilities and so forth, so a lot of the old tanks are being discarded. Another thing happened in Male, in the capital of the Maldives, because when the people from the German BTZ were there, they came during the monsoon, and this means that they always wear a nice jacket, nice pants, full leather shoes, and they had to walk in water this high on the street for their ministerial meetings. So they said, we can't have this. We have to give the Maldives some development aid. So they paved all the street, they made runoff from the street, and this sent all the rainwater out into the sea. The rain should percolate through the gravel, through the park gravel, to replenish the freshwater levels. And of course, when this happened, DANIDA, the Danish aid organization, came in and said, they have a huge water problem. We have to build a water distillation plant, which they did. After that, the population of the capital of Male grew from 25,000 to now around 90,000. Of course, because now there is no limitation of water use. The same thing is happening out on the islands because mechanical pumps have been installed. And that means that there is deprivation of the groundwater lens. Now when you pump enough of the fresh water floating on the salt water, the lens will implode and you will have a saltwater intrusion. Then you will have sulfuric bacteria coming in and you get this sulfur smell in the water. Now the Maldives is marketing itself both as a prime destination for upmarket tourism, at the same time as a poor nation with uneducated people being under a dire threat of sea rise. There's been no indication of sea rise. They say we have saline intrusions. This is typical for sea rise. It's not, because the freshwater lens is floating on the salt water. So if we had a sea rise, we could measure in the wells how the freshwater lens would come up, unless we had a change in the monsoon rains. Nothing like that has happened. They say we see more erosion because of the seawater rise, and they take journalists, they take politicians, they take social scientists, never hard science, never geophysicists like Niklas or specialist geologists, out and they show them. And when I was in Minicoy last December, our Danish Minister of Development was in the Maldives. And he came back and said, you can see easily with your own eyes how the sea rise is affecting the Maldives. He had been shown the island of Kandoroju, which was devastated by the tsunami. He had been shown the island of Formula, which here you see the new resort construction. And it's interesting that foreign companies are willing to invest in this kind of buildings if you know that the sea rise is rising very fast, if there's a huge danger of total destruction. So let's say it's a strange thing that, here you see another example, that you say on the one hand we encourage investment in tourism, on the other hand we have this very destructive sea rise. Here we have from one of the Danish anti-EU parties for the COP15 conference, and it says the Maldives, I take Danish examples now, the Maldives will vanish if the EU, the European Union, gets its way. And I gave them a ring and I said, are you worried that some of the international hotels would sort of be destroyed? And they said, we didn't know. We thought this was the And he was the one who could point out, he said, I know the distance exactly because the location of the distance from my house to the shoreline was measured at that point in time. And therefore I can point to exactly where it was. Now, the strange thing, or the obvious thing is, 5 minutes, yes, I'll finish in 5 minutes. The obvious thing is that these marketing efforts and the Maldives, of course, with more than 100 resorts, have a very efficient marketing apparatus. Is aimed at Europe, is aimed at the US. And here you choose islands that are far away. You don't look at your own place. I live on a small island in the Baltic, on the island of Bornholm. It's bedrock, which of course is much more dangerous than coral, because bedrock doesn't grow like that. And so you take islands that are very far away. You take the island group of Tuvalu. You take the islands of Kiribati, Gilbert Islands, and you say here terrible things are happening. I worked in Tuvalu, I worked in Kiribati, I worked all over the Pacific. And even when you look at the newspaper, there was a British story saying the Solomon Islands are threatened by the sea rise. And you heard certain Solomon Islands was picked for the purpose, talking about how terrible it would be with the sea rise. And I called the paper and I said, look, I don't think it's much of a problem, because the highest point in the Solomon Islands is 2.3 kilometers. So I think they may survive. Whereas the island where I live, the highest point is 162 meters. And I know the highest sea rise in recent times was 160 meters, so we will only have 2 meters left. Why don't you worry about us at home? And here, of course, you can see this is from Newsweek, the Green Guru, the Love Abroad, and the Man of the People. I don't have to comment on these things, but this is marketing sea rise in a country where the sea doesn't rise. Here we have an example from the tsunami. This is taken in 2008. Of course, the tsunami was also an example of sea rise. They are still in these temporary buildings in 2008. The Maldives received a lot of aid, but nothing happened here. We were just south of Male in the Wow Atoll. And you see how the Maldives is being built out. This is building out on the small atoll. This is the new harbor on Formula, where people are also brought and being shown how the coast is being destroyed by sea rise. The coastal erosion is caused by the harbor construction, and nobody calculated the sediment flow. So on the northern part of the island, you have heavy erosion. So when our Minister of the Environment came back, he brought his hand out and said, as I said, everyone can see the effects of the sea rise in the Maldives. Everyone except the Maldivians, and everyone except the inhabitants of the Laccadive Islands. Here is another example from a Danish paper. This is a 2-year student of sociology who went to the Maldives. She was brought as a Dane to the COP15. One of our papers says she is the eyes and the ears of the Maldives, because the Maldives don't have educated people. Maldives have hundreds of PhDs in geology, in agriculture and so forth. And she says one can see that all the plants except the coconut palms are dying. She has no idea about botany. I did the Maldivian botany. There is no die-off of plants in the Maldives. And here, again, at the end, the Maldives marketing themselves. They say, we don't need aid, we need investment. And especially, as you can see down below, the tourism sector is officially open for business. Don't worry about sea rise if you're doing business. Only worry about sea rise if you're at war, if you're a politician, if you're a student of sociology or any other soft science, And so I don't have very much more to say. This is not from the Maldives, this is from another atoll area where the sea is not rising. This is from the from an atoll